Jai Hind. Good morning, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen. My task is to take you from the saintly advice that we have received today to a bit of violent world. That is what VUCA stands for. But that is India. It has both. They coexist, the saintly as well as the violence in our country. VUCA stands for volatility. That is what is happening today more often than it did earlier. We're talking of nature and speed of change, the catalyst of change that you keep seeing every day. U stands for uncertainty, of surprise, of unpredictability that, again, we see more often today than we did a few years ago. C stands for complexity, which is multiplicity of forces, both working on you and that you want to make use of yourself, both ways. And the last bit is ambiguity, which is basically haziness and what we in the army call the fog of war. So, having spent over 45 years in the army, groomed for these kind of conditions, as well as having to practice these kind of leadership during these kind of conditions, my presentation is based on my own experiences, what I've learned and what I try to practice. One thing I want to make it clear that VUCA, when we are talking of that, it is not just leadership by yourself. It is leadership of an organization. So you need to be, your organization need to be as strong as your leadership that you want. Let's look at the VUCA world. In the last 50 years or so, things have been moving so fast, primarily because of technology. And you have growth of exponential growth of technology. Today, the military is required to cope up with the vast, very wide spectrum of conflicts, emerging conflicts. You have the nuclear war, you have the conventional war, the hybrid war, all kinds of things that are taking place, insurgencies, terrorism, of that kind of. And also ever-increasing technology, because earlier days when we had a weapon, you could use it for 30 years, 40 years. Today, after 5 or 7 years, it becomes old, you want to change it. So that is the kind of situation in which we have to respond both in a kinetic as well as non-kinetic fashion. We are talking of both, not just technology, we are talking of geopolitics, we are talking of geostrategy, everything together. But what is important is that no matter how sophisticated your weapons may be or your equipment may be, it is always aimed at breaking the will of your adversary and preserving one's own. That, I think, is the most important point. So fundamentally, we are talking of a human endeavor. It is the human mind that we are talking of, the adversaries as well as your own. You know, Sun Tzu said that it is better to win the war through the mind by attacking and capturing the mind of the others rather than getting into violent situations. So therefore, I have always believed that whether we are talking of war or we are talking of business, people are the core concern. And it is the human asset or human capital that you have in your organization, whether I'm talking of the armed forces or you're talking of your business, that is your biggest asset. And they always say in the army, it is always the man behind the gun. These days, women also. So men or women behind the gun, which is always matters most. And there is a quote from Sun Tzu who said, if you have good human capital, victory and rewards will be yours. They will follow. When talking of human assets or human capital assets, so you have to then think of leadership. I have, from my own experience, very simple 5 takes on leadership. And the first one is whether you are commanding 5 people or even 1.3 million people that I had under me at one time. The basics and essentials of leadership are the same. They don't change. So if you have grown up with that kind of teaching, that stays with you. The fundamentals are important. The second bit is a bit of a surprise for some of you. Leadership is 25, these days maybe even 30% knowledge. But rest of it, believe you me, it is your attitude, how you deal with people. Because what you want people is to do what you have in your mind. So how you get that done is very important, not just your knowledge, but your attitude dealing with the people. And the third one, when we have talking of leadership traits, there are many books written on that. I think the most important trait is your character, the sum total of good and bad in you. That is the most important thing. And that forms the component which creates trust. If people don't have trust, they will not follow you. So you have to create trust, and that basically comes from your own character. Leadership challenges, there is a symbiotic relationship. Leaders tackle challenges, and quite often you find that the challenges will also produce leaders. So leadership and challenges, they've got a good leader will take challenges, will always accept challenges and not shy away from that. And the last, which is the most important aspect, I think, is I don't believe that leaders are born. They're seldom born, very rare. They are a result of hard work. They are a result of self-belief, believing in themselves. Also, the kind of opportunities that they get and the experience that they gain from those opportunities. So these are just the 5 simple takes that I have and believed in after spending so much of time learning about leadership and all. Now, there is one thing that we learned when I was in the Indian Military Academy, the Academy Credo. You can call it our values, you can call it our ethos of the armed forces, but that still stays strongly in my own mind. And I think it is useful for everybody else, those who are running organizations. The safety, honor, and welfare of your country come first, always and every time. The honor, welfare, and comfort of the men you command come next. Your own ease, comfort, and safety come last, always and every time. If you can follow these as you grow up in your ladder, on the ladder, you will find that more and more people will be willing to follow you. And therefore, I have always believed that good leadership, again, is synonymous with high standard of values and ethics. This is what we learned. Even as I became chief, I had this credo on a board in front of me. So high ethical standards, sustained leadership, and both, whether we are talking of wars and in business. Now, in the armed forces, we generally divide our leadership training into 3 parts: the junior, the middle, as well as the senior level. Those I have put on the list here. I just want to talk about vision and intuition at the senior level. As you grow up in your career and you reach near the top, that time, well, in my own way, you can't wait for 100% facts to be given to you. I started believing in my own intuition. By the time you reach 60% or 65% of facts, then you started working on your own intuition. So intuition is also important. And I thought I must talk about it. We are talking about the change. change cannot be brought so much by the junior leaders, it can be brought about by the senior leaders. Larger the organization, more difficult it is to bring about the change, and therefore you have to have that kind of leadership at the top level who can bring about change. I think you learned a lot yesterday from Prime Minister Modi also. He was also talking about that kind of change. And there are 5 traits or attributes which are common at all levels, and you have to keep emphasizing that. And those are, as I said, first, character, physical and moral courage. Moral courage becomes more important as you grow senior. In the armed forces, physical courage is required more at the junior level and not so much at the senior level. But moral courage becomes more important at the senior level. Competence, commitment, and compassion. These are, again, throughout your career, you have to keep working on that. I'm now going to take you to the war scene. And I'm going to highlight some of these traits in that kind of environment that we faced when I was Army Chief and Chairman, Chief of Staff Committee. This is a map of Jammu and Kashmir, and you can make out where Srinagar is written. I'm going to draw the line of control in purple line, and the yellow line is the actual ground position line in Siachen sector. And POK incidentally stands for Pakistan Occupied Kashmir. This is what they did to us. Sometimes in May, in that area, they infiltrated people in jihadi clothes. It was Pakistan Army, but in jihadi clothes they infiltrated, and they came and sat in some part of our areas on the heights. So the first problem or ambiguity or fog of war that we faced was, for quite some time we didn't know who they are. Are they Pakistan Army, or they were the jihadis who had been infiltrating into Jammu and Kashmir, particularly in the Kashmir, for a number of years before that. I'm now going to show you some of the photographs where the war was fought during that, starting from Siachen. This is the kind of terrain that you find in the month of April, May, or June. During winter, this is the way you carry out your patrolling in that area. You have to work together as a team, otherwise you cannot exist at all. And therefore, you find this team spirit all the time is important. Some of the helicopters, helicopter bases, which you improvise at many places. These are actual photographs, incidentally. This, as you come towards Kargil sector, the terrain changes slightly, but the mountain tops are as sharp as you see here. These photographs were taken during that conflict, incidentally, in the month of May and June of 99. June becomes quite hot because of the sharp sun rays, and the snow melts very quickly. Once the sun is up, then the snow starts melting faster than you see any other time. And that is how you see it. This is that famous Tiger Hill became an important objective for us. This photograph is taken a little earlier in the month of May in Batalik sector. And this is how the terrain looked like from the helicopter, just to give you an idea of how the line of control, I have drawn this line of control from the helicopter looking at that. You can't really make out where you are at that time, unless you have a good GPS with you. That time we didn't have, unfortunately. So what were the challenges? The kind of, what we are seeing, VUCA. And let's go through that. First, of course, the terrain was mountainous, high altitude, glaciated. About the worst, I can say, where the wars have been fought from time immemorial. There was intelligence failure. There was absolutely no idea that Pakistan was preparing for that kind of a situation. And people did talk about jihadi infiltration, but that had been going on for a long time. Surveillance failure on the ground because we didn't have adequate gadgetry, we didn't have technology to be able to, and patrolling didn't really work that well, foot patrolling in that terrain. serious shortages of weapons. We were working on a very low budget and for a long time, really. And that's why there were these problems. And due to India's nuclear tests, which were conducted in the month of May 98, we had become a rogue nation in the world. And there were very strict sanctions put on us. I was supposed to go to UK and USA. All that got cancelled because they didn't want to have any defense relations with us. In fact, I couldn't even attend my daughter's wedding, who was getting married in USA during that period. So that is what it was. But I think the most important part was that it happened within 65 days after Prime Ministers of India and Pakistan had signed the Lahore Agreement, or Lahore Declaration. And the situation, thus, overall situation then became volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguity, all the VUCA elements that we are talking of. Well, as I said earlier also, in all human endeavors, we must be prepared to face adverse situations and failures and be prepared to rise. I think the Swamiji also mentioned the same thing, that you have to get up and be prepared to, and then with a stronger mind and greater determination. The instructions that were given to us by the cabinet after discussion, this was a grand strategy, that India, victim of intrusion, but will exercise restraint primarily because of the nuclear nation status that we had acquired a few months earlier, and the whole world was talking against us. India will take all measures, including military, to ensure that intruded area is vacated. We were not quite clear yet whether they were jihadis or they were Pakistan Army. And India's armed forces will not cross the border, our line of control. So our hands were tied to some extent. You know, literally you were now fighting with one hand. But that is the situation you have to face, because that is the political direction given to you. So there was always a sense of unpredictability, and that is what the armed forces have to face in my time and even today. So much of unpredictability around us, and that is what the business also is facing currently. Well, they say that a leader can be effective only if he knows his mind, he knows what he's wanting to do now, and he is able to convey it to all members of his team. That is important, and you have to make it clear in very simple terms that you understand. A Sipahi will not understand the language of a general, so you have to make it clear to everybody. And I think somebody had quoted me in one of the Sainik Sammelan that I did all over the borders, not only in the northern borders, but even on the western borders. So we worked out on a military strategy which had the elements of disruption. That becomes more important today when you are working on any strategy. That a strategy will work better if there is an element of disruption in that. Uncertainty, we were still not sure whether the Pakistanis will attack on the other borders. We had to be prepared for that. And also anticipation and capability. What were we going to do if that happens? An army general has to think 3 steps ahead, not just 1 step, but 3 steps ahead. You have to work on reaction, action, reaction, again action, reaction. So you're all the time going through what we call the OODA loop in the armed forces. So that is what we were. So our strategy was create strategic imbalance for Pakistan Army, reduce pressure on Kargil, threaten, maintain pressure on Pakistan throughout land, air, and sea border. If essential, be prepared to escalate the situation and launch forces across the border or LOC. Now you will see that this is a bit of a contradiction from what the political direction had been given. The Prime Minister, Mr. Vijay, he spoke twice in public that I have told the armed forces don't cross the line of control. When he did that second time, I managed to see him on that, and I said, sir, please don't make that statement again. So Prime Minister was a word of a few words. In fact, he wouldn't speak much, but he was a great listener. So he looked at me and says, why? So I told him, I said, so there are two conditions. Firstly, we don't know what the enemy may do. I will have to cross the border maybe. And the second thing, more important, is that if we cannot undo what has happened in Kargil sector, then I have no alternative except to cross the border international somewhere. Kept quiet. We kept walking. In the evening, the NSA, Vijay Mishra, he took an interview on a TV channel, and there he said that not crossing the border holds good today. We don't know about tomorrow. That was the message that. So he also mentally accepted what I was trying to convey. Again, here is a disruption strategy that I was making, or rather both my colleagues were also there with me. And so we had to compromise. We had to speak to the Prime Minister and get his okay, which we got. On this, I must also mention, by that time I had prepared the armed forces, particularly the army, to be able to cross the border in 6 days' notice if I give them that. So that kind of a preparation. So our strategy, in very simple graphic term, was something like this. This is what they did. This was our immediate reaction. And the strategy was, we showed them that we were capable, we were strong enough, capable of crossing the border anywhere else. Also, both not only on the land, but also on the sea as well as in the air. And that is how we worked on our strategy. As far as I was concerned, my work was there. After that, I didn't have to get involved in the operational planning or what was going on the. I just want to leave one more important thing, which is, again, which holds good for the armed forces as well as in the business world. With all the technology, we tend to command people from our offices. I don't quite believe in that. Those are facilitators, but they cannot replace your face-to-face talk with your colleagues on the. So we must never hesitate to visit where the action is on the spot. And my time is over. I thought I was going fast enough. Okay, I'll have to rush. So do visit the ground and have I spoken half an hour? Quickly, this is the empowerment. As a senior officer, you don't start interfering with the junior leaders. You only create an atmosphere in which they can function properly. Cooperation, collaboration is important, and motivation and leadership are closely linked. You must be there all the time to motivate people. By good motivation, you can get 110% or more from your people on the ground. Sometimes they do things that you don't even believe in or think of. We have AV. Now coming to junior leadership. Can we go to the AV, please?
Choppers can fly freely today over the Tololing Ridge, carrying crucial supplies to the men stationed on top. It's at least partly because of the bravery of Captain Vikram Batra. On the night of 19th June, Captain Batra led the final attack onto point 5140, the most hostile and challenging mountain peak on the Tololing Ridge. The recapturing of 5140 opened the way for the final assault on Tiger Hills. We met Captain Batra, or Sher Shah, as he was called by his men, when he was just getting ready for his next mission.
We had already decided our success signal before advancing for the attack, and it was like Bravo Company's success signal, Oye Aaya, and which was passed to our CEO Colonel Joshi on the radio set. And after the another bunker was captured, my company's success signal was Ye Dil Mange More. The guys were so highly charged up that they're wanting that some more bunkers should have been there and we would have got the more chaps.
An important point that I want to make is that leadership training has to be given at all levels. Generally, I find that in the corporate sector, we start thinking of leadership when people become vice president and other. but you have to start from scratch. At different levels, you have to keep training them for leadership. There are a few letters which were written by our soldiers, officers and soldiers, and I've got one of them just to give you an idea of what the motivational level was and what the kind of dedication that we had managed to develop in the army. We had and we still have, I'm sure. This is a letter from a young major, and I'm not going to read the whole letter, but he just says, you know what, even the chief sent a letter of congratulations to the unit after they had captured Tololing. I had sent a personal letter congratulating the unit for the work that they had done. It was indeed an honor for our unit to have been given such a task. Hard work and a secure ethos does have its merit, don't you think? Thank you. I'm taking another 2 minutes only. Please don't worry about casualties. It's a professional hazard which is beyond our control, so why worry? At least it's for a good cause. And then he quotes Bhagavad Gita, which says that if you are doing the right kind of job, righteous work, even if you die, you will go to heaven. I mean, that is a quote from Bhagavad Gita. He follows. And in the end, he's talking about his mother, who's not been keeping well, and asks his father to look after. Take care of your health as well as that of mother. Don't worry and lose sleep. Tell a story a day in Mahabharata to his wife and to the child that the wife was expecting. Unfortunately, we lost him before that child was born later on. But here he's talking of the atmosphere of the unit, how they were doing and all that. There were a few other letters. I'm not going to go into that because I keep hearing the call bell again and again. But a young officer, 22 years old, who says, I don't know what will happen at the next moment, but I can assure you and all countrymen, please note, 22 years old boy, that certainly we will push back the intruders at whatever cost. We skip this letter from a soldier who says, if we keep getting the sweets which somebody had sent him, then he says, what to talk of Lahore, we will also reach Islamabad, don't worry about it. And you sleep well in wherever you are. Well, even the leaders require motivation. And I found my motivation whenever I visited the front line. And that is what happens when you visit your front line, wherever you are. These are one photograph taken soon after. So there was courage, commitment, determination, and people were leading from the front. The spirit of that organization was very strong. And I'll end up by saying that VUCA world calls for leadership which possesses vision, understanding, courage, and adaptability. This is another acronym for VUCA. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. And sorry if I've taken 5 minutes extra. Thanks a lot. George.
Yes, let's keep those claps going. Thank you, General Malik, sir. Thank you for those words.